So you might think that dropshipping is just easy money, but there is a hidden side to it that most people don't talk about, which is
Many people misunderstand what's important when running a dropshipping business.
when you're starting out, I don't hear many people talk about the hidden costs, such as
Certain things might seem like a hassle, but it's absolutely essential that you
I want to help you if you're just getting started dropshipping, just in case you don't understand. Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked podcast. I'm Lewis Smith, the founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Eardley. Now, when we're not recording podcast episodes or running our own e-commerce businesses, you'll find us helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping stores. So if you're ready to build your own 6 or even 7-figure online business, then head over to dropshipunlocked.com/start. Now, sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
So today, the plan is we're going to chat about some of the lesser known hidden realities of dropshipping. We're going to be pulling back the curtain on dropshipping in true Dropship Unlocked podcast fashion. We want to make sure that you're fully equipped when getting into a dropshipping business. So I think, Lewis, that the dropshipping business model appeals to many, but there's more to it than actually meets the eye when you get into it. So let's dive in. What do you think is one of the hidden challenges that entrepreneurs face when they start dropshipping?
I think one of the things is probably balancing a 9-to-5 job initially with a dropshipping business, assuming that you're doing this as a way to then replace your income from a 9-to-5 traditional job. I say 9-to-5, I know many jobs are 8 till 6 or 7 till 7 or whatever shift patterns you're working. But the point is time management is really important in that phase because you only have finite amount of time. It's a finite resource for you. So you've got to be very selective in how you use that time to make sure that you're taking the steps to build the business incrementally. And you probably will need to make sacrifices on weekends, on evenings, and say no to certain social events in exchange for a future of freedom with an online business that allows you to travel the world and spend as much time as you want with the people that you want to. So it's kind of front loading some of those sacrifices, making some of those difficult decisions early so that later on you're able to experience the results and the fruits of your labor. But yeah, be under no impression that it's a walk in the park. If it was that easy and you didn't need to sacrifice any time and you could just do it while working a full-time job in no extra time per day committed to it, then everyone would do it and no one would work jobs. So you have to think, well, the people that have succeeded in this have made choices. They've made sacrifices early on and they've decided to put in the effort before work, after work. I used to work like 3 hours sometimes before my 9-to-5 job started to get this off the ground so that one day I knew I would never have to work a job again.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important that we understand that there is a front-loaded amount of work when you go to set up an e-commerce business. And I went through the same thing, Lewis. I was working alongside my full-time job. I had 9-to-5 shift pattern. And so I had to be really intentional with where I could carve time out in my day, which for me was the morning. I was most on it if I got up a little bit earlier and got one task done before I started work. But I had to be intentional with that time, where in the past I might have just stayed in bed before going to work a bit later on. So what about for you, Lewis? How did you carve in the time to build a business alongside a job?
Well, when I was doing it, it was before I had children, which I think does change things. So I don't know how I would do that now. I would do it, but I would have to find other ways of doing it. It might be that I did it after they went to bed in the evenings to make sure that I got as much time there. But when I did it the first time, there was a gym a couple of roads down from where I lived in London, and it was part of like a hotel complex. So I would go to the gym, which was, I think it was 24 hours. I think maybe it opened really early at like 6 a.m. So I'd go to the gym for like an hour, say 6 till 7, and then I'd work 7 till 9, for example, or maybe I'd just go in and work some mornings without going to the gym and get a solid 2 or 3 hours of work done in the lobby where it was like a little co-working space. You could order a coffee and just get your laptop out. And I would just work on making it, taking those initial steps, whatever the steps I had to do that day to move the needle forward slightly on the business and get it to the point where, it was eventually, it built a life of its own, where I could then use the profits from the business to hire a virtual assistant to come in and be customer support and manage it and make sales while I was at work. But at that initial point, it would be like, okay, well, I've got 5 suppliers I've signed. I've got a couple of 100 products to upload. Better get to it. It's just like, take these little actions every day and just start working on it. And eventually that then becomes, okay, now I've got a load of customer emails that I need to answer in the morning. And then eventually I realize, okay, what am I doing? I need to hire someone to do those emails in the day so that I can really just remove myself from the kind of the weeds of the business and just become a business owner rather than being stuck in the business.
Yeah. Eventually you start working on the business, but initially when you're wearing all the hats, it's all about working in the business and you're doing all the things. So you're signing suppliers yourself, you're uploading the products from those new suppliers, you're optimizing the website, you're setting up your own ad campaigns. So you're wearing all the hats and it's a very exciting time, but at the same time, there is an element of sacrifice. And for me, I had to sacrifice a few social occasions, had to sacrifice going to bed a bit earlier so I could wake up earlier to work on the business. But the thing that made it all worthwhile is I knew it was a sacrifice for myself, for my own long-term gain. And so I looked at the way I was spending so much time on my actual job, 9 to 5, understanding that sacrifice I was making was 8 hours a day for the workplace. And so the way I could flip it in my mind to make me see why it was worthwhile getting up earlier or sacrificing a few things I didn't want to sacrifice was because I knew ultimately I was the one that was going to benefit from the work I was putting into my business. So did you ever feel that it was very difficult for you to do it alongside a job? How did you convince yourself to make the sacrifices required in order to put the time in alongside a busy job as well?
Yeah, for me, willpower has never really been a problem. The problem is more the willingness to stop working. It's the ability to like remove myself and extract myself that is probably the challenge for me. Where that willpower comes from and where that drive comes from, I guess. I mean, thinking back, I knew that I wanted to have children one day, and I knew that when I was a father, that I wanted to be a present father. And I knew that I wanted to be very there for my children and show them a life that was possible, that was maybe outside of what the normal route in society is, where you go to an office and you're in a little cubicle and you work all day and you kind of punch your, clock in, clock out, and that's it for your whole career. I was very adamant that I wanted to show them initially. And by the way, these people didn't exist at the time. They weren't even here, but now they do, which is interesting because now that they do exist, it's kind of all fallen into place. And I really only have my former self to thank for that. Back in the day where, in 2017, I thought one day I think I'll be a dad. And when I am, I'd like to be this kind of dad. And in order to do that, I need to do this, this, and this. And I want to be this kind of husband. And therefore I need a business that gives me freedom over my time, location, finances. So it's like, okay, well, how do I achieve that? And it's like, okay, this is a perfect business model for it. Let me just take the steps. So it wasn't like I then had to motivate myself because I was doing the whole thing based on a much higher motivation from the start, if that makes sense. The motivation was the reason. The business was just the vehicle to create that freedom.
100%. Yeah, you had the strong why that we talk about a lot inside the masterclass program, which you always fell back on to build the business that you were building. And it's the same for me. It always outweighed the sacrifice or the time that I had to find because I knew that I had a big vision and I was ambitious and I wanted to create something for myself. So that overran it. And ultimately, I flipped the picture in my own mind that I knew I was starting to do things for the long term because I realized that the lifestyle that you live today is based on the actions that you're doing 6 months, 12 months, 2 years ago. That's what leads to today. Same as your body, the way you look is based on the actions you've taken in the last 6 months, not on what you do today. So there's that realization that whatever you're going to live, whatever lifestyle you want to have, it's not based on what you're doing in that moment, it's what you're doing in the future. So you need to front load some work. And that's what pushed me ultimately to do that work. And for anyone that's considering this, like how much time specifically would you need to set aside for building a dropshipping business alongside a job? What would you say?
Well, I'd say firstly, if it's important enough to you, you'll find the time, however busy you are, because you'll just carve it out. If it means you have to book some annual leave off to have a week off to just get really like, if you have not got a minute spare in your entire calendar, which I'd challenge you on if you feel like that, because I think there's always something we're doing that's a bit of a drain on our time, that's social media or Netflix or something that can go that doesn't serve us. But yeah, if you want a bit more of a structured approach, I mean, I put in, I'd say 1 to 3 hours per day initially, probably eventually more like 2 hours before work and then 2 hours after work, something like that, say 4 hours on average. I think it's it's less important to like say, I need a 15-hour stretch in a single day to do this, and more important that every day you're taking progress, because we underestimate what we can achieve in a year, but we perhaps overestimate what we can achieve in a day or a week, because we're like, oh, why am I not further ahead? I'm a week in. But it's like, hold your horses, just day by day, let's put 3 or 4 hours in per day. At the end of the year, you will have put some serious time and effort and focus into this business. And if you do it right and strategically, and you follow a blueprint, a model that's proven, then you'll be up and running, you'll be profitable, you'll be making sales. And at that point, you can then almost multiply that time effort by hiring other people, virtual assistants, who can come in and do a lot of those time consuming tasks for you. So now it's not the 2 or 3 hours a day you can put in, it's the 8 hours of shift that employee works, where they can put all of that time in. Suddenly you've bought yourself back that time. And then eventually you can leave your job, and then you've got your whole day free again. You wouldn't want to leave your job and then be like, right, I've got all day, I'm going to start uploading product. It's like, by the time you're replacing your income, you should have enough in the business coming in to be able to pay someone to do those daily tasks, so that you can really focus on like what's going to move the needle, what's going to double or triple the business. And it's like going out and finding new suppliers, signing those suppliers, starting another store, doing other things that can grow your income, rather than kind of being caught in the like daily management of the business.
Exactly. So the way I like to look at it with a business is that over time, the business starts really hard and gets easier as you start to get really clear on the processes that generate income for you. And you can bring people in to look after those processes for you. And whereas with a 9 to 5 job, over time, what I found in my 9 to 5 job was that it was getting harder and harder every year as you were given more and more responsibility, and people just came to you because you were the person that had been there for a long time. So you might resonate with that. So even if you're a busy person, there is always time if you value it enough. But I guess the final point on this is that if you want to reduce the amount of time it takes you, it's always easier if you have a clear path to follow, because instead of spending time working out what you need to do, that's already done for you. You know what you need to do if you're following a proven path. And so you just need to spend the time executing on the plan that's already laid out in front of you, which is what I did with the Dropship Unlock Masterclass. And yeah, I'd do it all over again, given the chance. So, okay, let's move on then to another lesser known hidden reality, perhaps, of dropshipping that isn't the one that's flashing in your face on Instagram. There's something else, Lewis, that comes to your mind when you think about, let's give people the reality of what it's like running a dropshipping business.
Sure. So I think if we're thinking about like other hidden realities, or maybe hidden costs that are often overlooked when it comes to dropshipping, and like the real version of dropshipping, running an actual e-commerce business, things like, for example, processing fees, like the fact that Shopify Payments takes a percentage fee that you need to be aware of and factor into your profit margin. Fraud prevention as well. We use a service called ClearSale, for example, which is like an underwriting fraud screening service that protects you against what are called chargebacks, which is where if a customer buys an item on a credit card and then they decide for whatever reason, either fraudulently or because they just don't want to pay, they contact the card company and say, no, I want to dispute that transaction. The card companies are notoriously fast to just give consumers back their money and then force the merchant, so us, to justify why they should not do that and why they should pay us out the original amount. This is grossly unfair, in my opinion. And the burden of proof falls on us for some reason as the merchants to have to prove that we did actually deliver the service. So you can kind of see why, I guess, but it feels very unfair when you're in the heat of it and you've had a £2,000 sale and then suddenly someone's done a chargeback. So we need to be quite aware of that from the beginning. They're rare, it depends what niche you're in, but there's something that I would factor in and make sure that you have a mechanism in place to protect you against that. Something like ClearSale screens the transaction for fraud, and if they believe they can underwrite it and they say it doesn't meet any of the fraud red flags that we see on our system with our algorithm, we're happy to guarantee it. You can put that sale through safely, knowing that if later it results in a dispute or a chargeback and the customer does a chargeback, you then get paid out the money by ClearSale. So you don't have to worry about that as a factor of your business, but you do have to factor in the fee that they'll take. So they take a small kind of handling fee up front. So those things can be covered if we have healthy profit margins. And the way we get healthy profit margins is from high ticket product sales from good quality suppliers. And so these are things that we've kind of factored into the model and the home turf advantage, like works together to say, well, you'll need these things. Therefore, to pay for processing fees and clear sale insurance protection fees, make sure you have nice high margins. And so the whole thing kind of factors together as a proven model. Another fee that people often forget is like accountancy fees. So once you're up and running and you're making money and you need your quarterly VAT done, or you need your corporation tax done at the end of the year, or your personal self-assessment done, it's like, well, are you going to do those things yourself? Probably not, unless you're a trained accountant. Even so, I probably wouldn't spend all your time doing that kind of stuff when you can be focused on growing the business. So you want to just factor in some cash flow for paying the accountant, and you want to get a good accountant, because a good accountant should really save your business money, not cost you money. And that's how the kind of old adage goes, isn't it?
It is perfect. Yeah, spot on. Now, these are exactly the type of unsexy answers that we wanted to talk about today, because nobody goes and is in their Lambo flashing about their Shopify sales, talking about the fact that they've mastered processing fees, fraud prevention, and accountancy services. It doesn't happen. But the point of this is that we're going to go into the business with your eyes wide open, because you understand that there are things that you need to master, or you need to factor in to the business that you're running. And like you say, Lewis, when you've got high ticket products and you've got good margins with those high ticket products, the processing fees and your accountancy fee and your fraud prevention will shrink into insignificance in terms of what you actually take home at the end of every single month. So perfect. Anything else then, Lewis, while we're on the subject that comes to mind when you think what's overlooked when people think about getting into dropshipping?
Well, I guess making sure the customers, who are the lifeblood of your business, remember, like they're the only reason your business exists, making sure they are actually satisfied. I think, like you say, if we think about the Lambo flaunting, private jet flaunting dropshipping gurus out there, they're not really talking about like, well, was the customer that paid you all that money even happy? Or did you just kind of make a load of flash in the pan sales on a burner store and then shut it down? Were you there to serve those customers? Did you build a good brand reputation? Were they happy? And I think those things you've got to be aware of, and making sure that customer satisfaction is good. Because if you want to be around in business for the long term and build a defensible, sustainable brand that's there to pay you an income for years to come, then word of mouth, it gets around. You want to make sure customers are talking highly of you. Returns, another unsexy topic that no one wants to talk about. Returns and refund requests, they're going to happen. It's like, it's e-commerce. You are going to get the occasional customer that for whatever reason isn't happy, wants a return, maybe through no fault of yours or the product, someone else bought them the product at the same time and they now no longer need that version, right? So we've got to make sure that our customer service is on top of that stuff. Good suppliers that you work with based in the UK will be able to accept back returns. So you won't have to, take the hit on those returns. Usually if the item is in an as new condition and it's within a certain time frame, depending on the supplier, the customer can just send it back directly to the supplier. You get refunded or credited and you carry on. So it's not like you're having to then ship the item back to China like you would be if you were using Temu or AliExpress. And obviously there's just, at that point, you end up just taking the hit because it's not worth doing that. Other factors are like handling unexpected issues that you might encounter, things like late deliveries. Hopefully we can keep everything running smoothly, but occasionally DHL or TNT or one of the couriers are going to let us down and there's going to be a problem. An item's going to arrive broken, or a late delivery. It's going to arrive after someone's birthday, whatever it is. The item might be faulty. Maybe it was quality checked when it left the warehouse, but then for some reason it was faulty. So we got to make sure we have these policies in place where we have a returns policy, we have a clear shipping policy, we have, things like our privacy policies and cookies policies legally on the site as well. And just make sure that we're covering ourselves and that we have kind of contingency plans and SOPs, standard operating procedures, for our team to follow in the instances that emerge. And sometimes it's hard to predict what those will be. So you've just got to be okay with figuring them out as they happen and documenting them so that when they happen in future, because they will happen again, your team have kind of a plan and a script to follow that ends up with the customer being happy at the end of it, hopefully. You'll also find sometimes there's just an unreasonable customer who's asking for something that you can't do, and you'll have to stand your ground. Again, something no one wants to talk about, but it's part of running business. If you're a shopkeeper, you're going to get some difficult customers. It's the same online. So just be aware of this stuff, coming into it eyes wide open, and you won't then be shocked or disappointed when it happens.
Exactly. And it's inevitable that there will be things that turn up like that. Like, it's inevitable you will need to keep a customer happy if you go to sell to them. So we don't want to create this illusion, like some people do, that dropshipping is all about just on your phone, click a few buttons and money starts pouring out of it. You will have to keep customers happy. You'll have to be responsible. And also you'll have to be ethical. You have to make sure that customers are genuinely looked after. That's because we want to build a long-term brand. We want to build a business that's going to pay us for years, not just weeks or months. And we're not going to ruin our reputation just for the sake of making some quick money. We want to be making money for the long term that then allows you to live a lifestyle where you travel the world or you spend lots of time with your family and friends, because you're guaranteed that the income is going to continue to come in. And the only way you're going to be able to have that guarantee that the income will continue to come in is if you've built a long-term sustainable business. And so that happens when you have policies in place, when you can handle returns, and when you can ensure that your customers are happy when they purchase from you. So I think we've covered a lot there of the hidden costs and challenges, so people are understanding what they're getting into with dropshipping. And I think a lot of people will listen to this and realize, well, actually, that's not too bad, is it? That's expected. Whenever you're going to run a business, there's going to be a few things that you need to take care of. And for those people that are keen to overcome any obstacles that come in their way because they know the advantages that come from having a business like this, where would you suggest they start? And crucially, what kind of mindset would you suggest they get started with?
I think you've got to start with clarity and transparency, which is hopefully what we've provided in this podcast episode. That was the intention of it, to give you real kind of unfiltered view of like what this business is and what the challenges you'll most likely encounter along the way are, just so that you're coming into this eyes wide open, aware of the road that lays ahead. Then defining really clear goals and making sure that you have a business plan and that you've got achievable milestones and a bit of a roadmap for your first year, so that you know the key actions that you've got to take. That you can break that down into like what you want to achieve each month. You can break that down into the hours you need to put in each day and what those actions that you're taking are as well. The key to all of this is not to get overwhelmed as well, because if we look at the big picture, remember, we underestimate what we can achieve in a year because we look at what we want to achieve and we think, oh, that's just too big, and we get overwhelmed and therefore we do nothing. The key to this and success in any business is looking at the end goal, the kind of thing that you want to achieve, and then breaking it down, chunking it up into manageable bite-sized chunks, and then taking the actions required in order and not being overwhelmed along the way, focusing on one thing at a time. That's important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And not getting overwhelmed by the big picture, or even really considering the things we've talked about too much today. Be easy to put yourself off if you get too focused on these things. In reality, businesses are not built in a day. They're not built in a week or even a month. They're built over time with consistent daily actions. So all you need to focus on, rather than building a business, is just the one action that you need to take every single day. So for specific advice, or the specific signpost you'd give to somebody to get started with this eyes wide open approach that we like to give people, where should they go after watching this or listening to this episode today?
When you are going it alone, it's difficult because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you might encounter along the way that other people have already encountered and overcome. So that's why things like mentorship or being part of a really strong community, in my opinion, is vital when you're going to face those challenges down the line, the ones that we've discussed today, and probably lots as well that we haven't discussed. So you can avoid a lot of these costly mistakes simply by learning from other people who've already been through them, or by being around people who you can ask when you inevitably encounter them. It's no coincidence that I created Dropship Unlocked as a reason to try and fulfill that need of feeling isolated and alone when building a business and not having the answers that I needed. This community now exists, and you can find out about it by heading to dropshipunlocked.com/start to get your own roadmap in place.
Are you enjoying the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or a review and we might feature it in an upcoming episode. And for detailed show notes and resources, visit dropshipunlocked.com/podcast.
If you found value in any episode of this podcast, please could you take just 10 seconds to leave us a quick 5-star review on your favorite podcast app? It helps us more than you can imagine. And who knows, you might just hear your comments read out on the show. Thanks for being a part of our community. Your support helps us keep delivering new episodes to you every week.
Now, it's that part of the episode where we'll answer a question that we've received from a listener. So if you're listening today and you have any questions going through your mind that you'd like answered by Lewis or I, simply comment beneath the YouTube video version of this episode. And not only will it be answered in the comments, but it may also be featured in an upcoming episode. So this week, the question has come in from D. Lachowski. So thank you for your question. So D. Lachowski has asked, "Hi Lewis, I recently encountered an issue with Shopify regarding their Gmail email forwarding feature, which has now been removed. So just a quick question. How have you resolved this issue?"
Yeah, thanks for your question, D. Lachowski. So, yeah, hopefully it's a really simple one. I can point you in the right direction. To set up email forwarding with these services, you need to verify your domain with whoever you're using for your email hosting provider and update your domain's DNS settings. So that typically involves adding something like a specific TXT record to your domain's DNS settings, and that then authenticates your domain, and it should enable your email forwarding for you. So it's all covered in our program step by step. If that just sounded like a load of jargon gibberish to you and you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's all laid out in a sequential process inside our program. But hopefully that gives you what you need to know to help you with that question.
Perfect. Yeah, spot on, Lewis. And yeah, it's a great question because it's important that we have a professional email address. And that's what that question's all about. So we're going to highlight also a recent review that we've had for the podcast, because we love to give you a shout out if you decide to leave us a review after listening to an episode. So a big thank you to Quincy82 AAC for sharing your thoughts. So Quincy said, "I am a solopreneur of my own online dropshipping business, and your videos are great."
Thank you so much for your review, Quincy. We're really glad to hear that you've been enjoying the podcast. Now, before we wrap up this episode, I'd love to ask a quick favor of you. If you haven't already and you've enjoyed today's episode, could you take just a moment to leave us a quick review for this podcast? Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and improve our content. Plus, we might just read your review like we did for Quincy today on our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you are leaving with new insights and inspiration to fuel your entrepreneurial journey.
To kickstart your e-commerce business, head over to dropshipunlocked.com/start. It's the perfect place to start and get access to resources that will help you build your business from the ground up.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more episodes packed with strategies, tips, and success stories. Plus, if you enjoyed this episode today, a 5-star review would mean the world to us, and you might even get a shout out on the next episode.
Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. We can't wait to bring you more insights on the next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.